Players in Australia and New Zealand bet more money over the internet than those from any other nation in the world. This came through on an iGaming business email for me when I was doing this presentation, so it was almost meant to be. When this came through, it basically confirmed what I already suspected, because when I've been promoting online casinos, I always find my Australian players are the biggest, and they last a lot longer. I did have some American traffic early on, but that never really worked that well for me. They were sort of like picking and choosing and looking around, whereas I find with the Australians and the Kiwis, they really stick around a lot more. So today I'm going to share with you my experiences in the industry, how I got involved, and some of the tips I picked up along the way to promote to Australasians, and hopefully you'll learn something out of that. Before we get started though, I'm going to have to give you a bit of a lingo lesson because you might not be familiar with some of the words that we use. I'm going to talk a lot today about pokies, and if you go to Google image search, google.com, the American version, and you type in the word pokies, this is usually what you get. I'm not going to be talking about that today, unfortunately. If you go to googleimagesearch.com.au and type in pokies, this is what you get. And that's basically what pokies are. They're poker machines, or slot machines, online gaming machines. The reason why they're called pokies, it's an Australian thing. Australians, I don't know if you know, they're kind of lazy with the English language. I can say that because I'm a Kiwi. But they like to shorten everything down. So, for example, this here is what I would refer to as a gas station or a service station, but our Aussie friends call this a servo. So, poker machines, when they first came out, when they first sort of came across to Australia in the late 40s, early 50s, and they started to be manufactured in the 50s, they were called poker machines because of the poker card symbols that were on all the reels. And Aussies being Aussies became pokies. So, yeah, I know. So now that we've got that sort of that out of the way, let's get into it. The Australian market is still what I would consider still very young, and it's still quite turbulent as well, as we know obviously with the recent legislation stuff that's going on. They did, however, get their first online casino in '99 with Lassiter's Casino. It was licensed in the Northern Territory. It was the only online casino license handed out. In 2001, the Interactive Gambling Act came out, and that basically stopped any more online casino licenses being handed out in Australia. And the reason for this is basically because the government didn't really know how to quite tax it yet. And they really just wanted to come up with a way that they could sort of monitor it and tax it better and that sort of thing, but it never really eventuated. Obviously, there's more things going on with it now because it's obviously such a big issue. There was also in 2001 a moratorium put on casinos, land-based casinos, so the construction and expansion of current casinos is not allowed at the moment, and that's being tested at the moment by Sky City Adelaide, because they're in this big old train station building and they're trying to move out of it and trying to expand, and of course they've got their legislation in place which is forbidding them to do that, so there's all sorts of interesting things going on there in Australia at the moment. New Zealand, on the other hand, we have no online casinos. We only have one racing and sports betting site, which is called the TAB, and we have one online lotto site, which is all these are run by the government. The New Zealand Lotteries Commission is a government organisation. And that's only recently launched in the last couple of years. At the moment, they're looking at trying to introduce online scratch cards as well, but the New Zealand public are all up in arms about it. The New Zealand public in general, gambling is very different to Australia. In New Zealand, gambling is almost a dirty word. It's not really a socially acceptable form of entertainment. It's very much a lower socioeconomic activity, and you can drive out to some of the slummier sort of areas of Auckland. Yes, we even have slums ourselves. And you'll find lots of like pokey parlours and that out there being played by people who can't afford to play them. It is really not a glamorous sort of thing. Very different to Australia. In Australia, there's a real gambling culture, and it starts very young. And as you can see from the young photos up there, you can walk into any pub in Australia, and within 5 minutes, you will have a Keno ticket in one hand, a $20 bill on a pokey, a bet on a greyhound, and a beer in the other. Any pub in Australia, like some of them are really flash. Like they've got lots and lots of machines and massive big screens and that sort of thing. Like they put some Vegas casinos to shame. It's quite incredible. So yeah, it's totally socially acceptable over there to gamble in Australia, and of course, you know, there's the saying that Australians will gamble on two flies crawling up a wall, and that's pretty much true. This was evident actually recently. My sister-in-law went to live in Melbourne, and they've got this thing where when a new employee comes in, they get the new employee to write down, you know, 3 or 4 things that they do, like their hobbies and that sort of thing, and then they circulate around all the other employees so that when he arrives on his first day, everyone's got something to talk about. This guy had put down, you know, he was into rugby and he was into bowling and he was into gambling. Now, he was going for a finance job. Now, she came home and she was like, I can't believe this guy, he's put down gambling as one of his you know, hobbies. Now, if this had been New Zealand, he definitely wouldn't have even got the job. He certainly wouldn't have got an expense account, and a company credit card would have been out of the question. But in Australia, it's totally normal and totally acceptable, and he came on the first day and everyone was, oh, so you're into gambling, you know, what's your favourite type, and all this sort of thing, which is really, you know, from a Kiwi's point of view, is quite incredible. So, yeah, but I mean, it's because from a young age, you know, like you see the pictures up there, most of those I just flogged off Google image search, you know, out for a big night and that sort of thing. And that's what a lot of Aussie young people do. They will go out to the pub at, you know, sort of 7, 8 o'clock, and they'll play the pokies for a couple of hours before they go out night clubbing. And that's totally acceptable and normal and cool. In New Zealand, that would definitely never ever happen. And I suspect probably in other markets too. It's probably a little bit sort of taboo and a little bit, you know, behind closed doors sort of thing. So with bearing all this in mind, promoting to New Zealanders. These are some things that you need to keep in mind when you are promoting to New Zealanders, and this is obviously more directed at probably affiliate managers as well. You've got to be discreet with your mailers, big flashy things, and I'm talking about here, like, you know, when you send out discs. I'm not talking about the email mailers. I'm talking about when you send out discs and those kinds of printed materials. You've got to be really discreet with it. Just because someone gambles doesn't mean that other people in the house know he's gambling or she's gambling. They probably want to keep that one pretty quiet. They might have even used their work postal address or something when they've signed up for accounts and that sort of thing. So they obviously don't want everyone else knowing what they're up to. So just sort of something to keep in mind, but you probably want to be really discreet about it when you're dealing with Kiwis. Another thing Kiwis have too is a very highly tuned bullshit detector. The biggest, most popular TV show in New Zealand is a program called Fair Go. And this is basically a scam buster show, and it's half an hour every week, 52 weeks of the year. Now, for a country of only 4 million people, I'm amazed that they can fill that much content, but they're always on the lookout for a big scam. And I mean, we're not scammy people by nature, but they seem to be able to do it. So Kiwis have got this thing, they're really suspicious of anything, you know, and if anything looks too good to be true, it is, you know, and they're like, oh, you know, I saw that on Fair Go, or oh, no, it doesn't look right, you know, we're going to see them on Fair Go soon, you know, like this seems to be the thing with Kiwis. So you've got to try not to appear too scammy. So when you're doing your promotions, and you are looking at targeting Kiwis, be really careful with your unrealistic bonuses. Now I know there are some out there at the moment, and I'm not like trying to rag on anyone here, but I know some of them like, you know, $1,000 free or 500 free spins and that sort of thing. Kiwis know there's no such thing as $1,000 free. You know, it's just not going to work. So not only will they not really sort of buy into it, they just won't even bother. They'll just leave it alone. I have worked with another company, I think it was Slotto Cash. They do a $7 no strings attached sort of deal, $7 to try out their casino or whatever. That worked really well for me because $1,000 up against $7, Kiwis can understand. Oh yeah, I can see why the casino would give me $7 to try this out, but I can't see why they'd give, you know, how many people are going to get $1,000 for free. So probably don't even bother trying with these unrealistic things. Like if you try and keep it small or whatever, and you know, more realistic, they're going to go for it. Aussies, however, I find them a little bit more accepting of gambling, obviously because their culture is surrounded by gambling. I've found them more than willing to give anything a go, so the bigger, more unrealistic bonuses and that sort of thing do seem to work okay with Australians. It's not too bad. But they seem to be a little bit more open-minded and a little less suspicious than the Kiwis. One thing I've just put up there as well is to localise as much as possible and note the spelling on that. We use the S where most Americans and British, anyway, we use an S where the Americans would use a Z, and we don't usually like it when we get fed the same thing as all the Americans do. Just because we speak the same language doesn't necessarily mean that we're exactly the same. We also have a few different things, like the word favourite, I have a U in it, whereas Americans it's just F-O-R, you know, V-O-R. And colour is C-O-L-O-R, ours is O-L-O-U-R. Again, these things are not amazingly important, these aren't deal breakers, and they're not going to make or break anything, but all these little increment steps just make the player feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more, you know, obliged to, you know, give you guys a go. So if you can keep these things in mind when you're doing your promotions, it will help you a hell of a lot.